Hey guys, it's Mapper here once again, and before getting into the patch notes later tonight with the wine, the cheese, the being drunk stream all night long, I do want to have a quick wrap up of the news and events that happened in the past week for the announcements of challenge rewards, some skills, and the development manifesto. So just some opinion pieces. Let's jump straight into it so that you kind of know what I'm thinking on all of these things, or just if you haven't seen them to begin with, then here's the information. So to start with, it is the Heist Challenge rewards, just real quick, the rewards that are coming in the Heist League. So you start out with the helmet pack, 12 challenges completed, you get 3 different helms, and I think that's a pretty good concept because usually you just get one helm. If you don't like it, well, shit. Whereas this is 3 different ones, and they can go into different armor sets and different little pieces together. The cat, for some reason, maybe it means something, maybe it doesn't, but it was teased a bunch, and now you get to have that cat pet. Looks kind of cute. And then the portal, I think, is pretty good looking for a portal, especially for a free one. It does look very fancy. Should replace plenty of people's free portals, I think, from previous leagues and all that. Looks pretty good, I think. So overall, challenge rewards, not too bad. No back attachment, no weapon effect or anything, but I do think that's a decent spread of challenge rewards. Not sure if I'll go for 36 myself. It usually has to be a very good portal, and I think it is pretty good. We'll have to wait and see how it looks in-game as well. So that's that out of the way. Now I'll do the development manifesto, then the 3 skill reveals, because this is probably more interesting for more people, I would think. So, development manifesto. This isn't patch notes, this usually just outlines essentially what they're thinking from the previous league to this league as far as certain balance and meta shifts are concerned. Some things are too strong and they typically need to be lowered. You know, a lot of the time some things are too weak and they need to be buffed, but that's less an issue as the too strong things, because they're the ones that are generating the power creep and making things way too sort of imbalanced. And if you try and bring everything back up to that same strength level, then you're just going to get this cascading effect where it will run away forever and everyone's too powerful and the game means nothing. So, development manifesto. To start with, we've lowered the offering effect on the Necro's Mistress of Sacrifice and Ascendment back to its value of 50%, so slight offering nerf there, which I don't think should really kill too many builds or really be a very big deal. It's just trying to combat some of the more overpowered Spellslinger builds, I think. And then they've also lowered the crit chance and multi on Assassin's Deadly Infusion, and look, that is a little annoying, but currently you can build just about everything as an assassin. If it were up to me, for so many builds I looked at, I'm like, why not assassin? I'm supposed to do assassin. Assassin's the clear choice. But I try and branch out and do many different things, so I don't always pick assassin. And currently, assassin really doesn't give a shit about crit. If you're assassin, if you have some crit investment on the tree and stuff, then you're damn near capped. So a slight lowering probably shouldn't be the end of the world. The elusive nodes are still really strong, the generation of power charges and all that, and the big extra crit damage. So hopefully it's not too big a nerf, because it should still be fine. If it's a very big nerf, maybe you won't go assassin quite as often. Glancing blows, very powerful defensive mechanic at the moment. It's getting taken down to 65% of damage taken from blocked hits. I guessed that if they were going to touch glancing blows, and I thought they probably would, they'd probably just nerf the number on it. So instead of 50% damage of your blocked hits, you will now be taking 65% of that damage, and in plenty of cases that's still fine. For lots of builds I've run that have staff block, for example, it's pretty damn easy to get up to like 60-70 block without too much effort, and that's a huge defensive boon. And 35% is still pretty good, and it's still probably worth taking in lots of these situations. Though, weirdly enough, they do say that it's just too strong combined with the recovery of life and energy block, and that does seem to be the more like prevalent abuse of this sort of mechanic, and this doesn't really kill it. It just makes it a little bit worse for everyone, as opposed to the people that have the life or energy on block, which probably should have just been a number nerf in itself, as opposed to the glancing blows, if that's what you're trying to combat. But otherwise, I don't know, it's an okay change. You'll still take it sometimes, and block is still a very powerful mechanic without this. Divine Flesh, currently way too strong, and that's pretty obvious in plenty of builds. So not a very big nerf, they're just lowering the amount of max chaos res to 5 instead of 10, so it's a bit harder to get max chaos res, and at the same time no harvest is a bit of a nerf already, because harvest made getting chaos res extremely easy. Enduring Cry, Warcry combined with Call to Arms, so that just makes it instant. It was very autopilot, you just put it on your left mouse button and then run around, constantly getting endurance charges, the regen, and defensive bonuses up without any thought or effort, and they're just basically changing Enduring Cry cooldown to 8 seconds. So that'll still happen if you want it to happen, but otherwise it's just annoying for everyone else, I guess. And it's a bit harder to generate endurance charges before a fight, for example. I think Enduring Cry will still be very strong in plenty of builds, but obviously slightly less overpowered now. If you're heavily into Warcries and stuff, Enduring Cry will still be pretty nutty, pretty insane, but for everyone else, maybe it's a little bit worse. I don't think that's a big change anyway, or a big deal of a change. Ball Lightning, just apparently it was too strong with slow approach. They're just nerfing its damage a little bit, and that seems fair. Spellslinger getting a bit of a nerf while leveling, because that was apparently too good, which was pretty obvious. And in the end game, it should be, what, I think slightly worse. I think that's still going to be fine. Spellslinger is very strong, very autopilot and convenient. You should be losing something at making the choice of auto-casting a lot more smoothly. And I didn't really personally abuse this stuff too much, and those that did, I think, should still see plenty of Spellslinger use anyway. Redemption Sentry Spectre, those things are insane specters, and you've seen plenty of videos yourself, I'm sure, of those things annihilating complete ass. Then yeah, it makes sense that they get a slight damage nerf, so that they're not just the most busted spectre in the game. And we might get new specters that are busted anyway, who knows. Cost of Jewels, just a few little tweaks, they say. So those are to Precise Commander, that's the crit multi aura one. Vicious Bite, which I think is some minion thing, and Vengeful Commander. It's a bit of a shame because for Cluster Jewels, pretty much the only ones I really use these days are like Precise Commander and Vengeful Commander, and then a few other little niche ones. So it does kind of suck, but I mean, it makes sense. I really couldn't imagine lowering the number on Precise Commander, though. It's already pretty small, so I don't know about that change. Vengeful Commander, that's fair enough. That's the aura one that does 30% hatred and all that. And yeah, it could probably go down to 20. If it goes any lower than 20, it's not going to be used, I don't think, and just too much of a nerf. But a bit of a shame. Vitality, Precision, Clarity. So basically all this is they're going to make Vitality reserve flat mana instead of a percent, because it's about time that happens. And then it's also going to give flat regen. I think that's what it was. Which mana has we changed skill to have flat mana reserve and flat regen. Yeah. So that should make it a lot more useful, especially at level 10, which will be pretty crazy for leveling. And I think a lot more builds will see use of Vitality. I personally love having a Stone Golem in so many builds because that little extra regen just makes life feel a bit more comfortable between monster packs, waiting for boss phases, shit like that. So Vitality might see plenty more use in my builds, and we'll have to wait and see what happens to the Watcher's Eyes, because they are nerfing some of those in regards to the really low mana cost auras. But that's a good change, I think. Violent Purity, change from less damage taken to grant max res. Since you can only cap a certain amount of max res, that just means that you can't really become immune to elements like you can with like enough less damage taken. So this is to combat some of the people that are abusing this stuff to make immune elementals characters and all that. And yeah, fair enough, fuck 'em. Ailment effect, I don't think this is really going to affect just about anyone, but some ailment effect stuff is now going to affect Sap and Brittle. Pretty meaningless change, I think. Projectile behavior order, so they're just rearranging the way some of the projectiles prioritize their random shit. So pierce, fork, chain. Not not too big a change for most people. It's just going to affect some steel skill shit, I think. And then the return projectile thing with chain might function a bit friendlier for some people, but I've never even used that. Overall, yeah, it's just supposed to make sense sort of mechanical change. Reduce visibility and stealth. So currently there's builds that you can have where you just like run through shit in your stealth, which was immune, like you can't be seen kind of thing. And now they're just making it so there's less chance or less area for you to be detected. And I guess that makes sense for the Heist League, so you can't just completely bypass mechanics. Fair enough, whatever. Changes to mods which provide flat life regen. So plenty of stats or mods on items in the end game just give a shit amount of flat life regen. Like, you know, you roll a rare armor, one of the suffixes is 10 life regen or something. They're just doubling that so that it's less shitty. And at this point, I think the new numbers are something like 40 to 50 life regen at its complete maximum on a single item, which is pretty, you know, it might seem small, but that's a decent change. If you really want to stack lots of life regen, get it on like 5 pieces of gear, for example. It's 250 life regen. That's like 2 stone golems. And I usually use a stone golem. It's pretty nice. So if you really wanted, stack fucking 5 of them. Not 5 of them, 5. Stack all 10 items and then you've got 500 flat life regen, which is for, you know, my 5k life characters, 10% regen. Pretty good stuff. So yeah, it's got potential, but chances are you're still not really rolling for it. It's just less of a shit stat. And then changes to the mod tag system. So the mod tag system that was basically introduced with Harvest, that you'd really care about when you hold Alt and see more descriptive stuff, is going to have more descriptive stuff, so that it's a bit more obvious what you're doing and what works and what doesn't work for like fossils and Harvest and stuff in the future, or other things in the future. And there's not really going to go over that. Chances are you won't really care too much when interacting with this stuff. It'll just be a few niche uses and all that. And they did link all of the mods here, which is like fucking 40,000 of them or something. So if you feel like scrolling through that, go get them, champ. So that is the manifesto. Nothing too huge. You could have expected some of these nerfs, and there might still be buffs and stuff coming in the patch notes. You would hope some Ascendancy reworks are coming at some point. Not even reworks, just slight numerical changes to make some Ascendancies a bit more viable. Because yeah, just lowering the Assassin or maybe the Necromancer doesn't really make you want to play something that already feels shit at the moment much more. And for a lot of people, that's an Elementalist, for example. Just in a bit of a weird spot. So we've got ourselves some area control skills. So let's watch this to start with, and then I'll kind of talk over the top of it. So area control skills involve, let me move my cam so that we are just outside of the skill range. They are Void Sphere. So Void Sphere looks like it's got a 10-second cooldown. That's what they originally said, but they're looking into maybe changing it because it's popular. 10-second cooldown, one use, you slap it down, and it's supposed to suction a whole bunch of enemies into the sphere. It is Fizz and Chaos based. It looks pretty damn neat. It might be very situational. I'm not sure you're going to be really like properly building around it given the cooldown. Unless they do change some stuff, but it looks very cool, and hopefully doesn't feel too bad in lots of builds to just place down occasionally. I'll talk a bit more in a second. Frost Shield, so it's kind of incentivizing standing still by placing a bubble, a Frost Shield, that reduces some damage incoming, take it, and gives you a buff of some damage, I think. You also get the sort of buff going for a longer duration even after leaving the shield, and I guess we'll read it and talk about it in a sec as well, but looks pretty cool. And then Sigil of Power, similarly, for more lightning based stuff, trying to incentivize your standstill or your hand cast playstyle so that you get more damage and a bit more utility while in your circle or standing still and casting, as opposed to non-stop running around. So maybe a bit more balance comes to characters that don't just blaze through everything. And then Flame Wall, we've already seen this one a bit earlier, but put up a Flame Wall, things can burn when hitting it. Otherwise, you can hit projectiles through it, and that will give them additional fire damage as well. Looks pretty neat. We'll see if the numbers hold up as to whether or not it'll be useful for actual things. So, the skill for Void Sphere does say that it creates one Void Sphere every 10 seconds at the moment. Second Wind can give you a second charge and lower the cooldown a bit. You can still only have one up at a time, and the idea is that it just kind of pulls enemies towards the center, so clusters things up, and it definitely will have some utility and some use. Whether or not it'll actually be very useful, you know, for a lot of situations is going to depend on how low you can get that cooldown and how well you can fit it into your playstyle. If you're blowing up screens already like pretty reliably, one every 10 seconds is going to do fucking nothing, and one every 5 seconds even is going to do fucking nothing. So you got to be a bit careful about that, unless you're building into a much slower character. But otherwise, deals Fizz and Chaos. It says pulls magic rares and normal into the center, and it's got a bit of different mechanics around that sort of suction. But yeah, I don't know, it's a very long cooldown. It does look cool, don't get me wrong, but we'll have to wait and see if they have any tweaks coming, because otherwise I'm really not sure it's going to be super viable in mapping or later game scenarios, except for like popping it when you're about to open a box, when you're about to open a breach, shit like that. I think that'll be still very useful for that, but otherwise pretty limited utility, I would think otherwise. Frost Shield creates an icy dome, protects the caster and their enemies. When it casts, rapidly consumes your energy shield at a flat rate for 1 second, growing power and life based on how much energy shield is drained. Provides protection till it runs out of life. So it will protect you and your allies, small portion of damage, or a large portion if they're outside of the shield. So maximum benefit if you're inside, they're outside. All enemies close to or within the shield will also be shielded. But it also gives you a bit of a base crit strike chance buff while you're inside the Frost Shield's dome. Makes it great for defensive, blah, blah, blah. So it seems to me like it might well be something you can chuck into a build even just offensively as just a big damage button increase. So press the button, get Frost Shield, and all of a sudden you got better crit, and it's probably going to be part of a rotation for plenty of builds that just want a bit more crit chance. So regardless of the actual defensive support of it, fuck 'em, just use it for damage. Otherwise, yeah, look, it might still come in handy for defense. Typically, standing still is the worst defense you can have in this game, so do you really want to invest heavily in the no-move meta? We'll see. It depends on the numbers, I guess, but otherwise getting the buff up just for crit strikes will be pretty sexy. Sigil of Power then creates a potent circle on the ground, grants additional lightning damage, while slightly increasing the cost of your skills. So they're really tying into that lightning and mana sort of combination still. They're really happy with that one. So more mana cost, more lightning damage. Spend mana, the skill powers up in stages. Each stage grants more additional lightning damage, and once it's fully powered up, causes enemies standing within the circle to deal less damage. So that does sound pretty good. Bunch more damage, standing still, makes other things deal less damage. Still probably limited use and viability in standing still, and not too many bosses really promote standing still for long periods of time, so we'll have to kind of see how it works, how often or how quickly you can charge it up. Way to empower your abilities, yep. Defensive, yeah. Like other spells, this ability is long cooldown, second wind, sure. And Archmage and stuff like that. I guess if you can get a really big mana cost, then you can use it in these types of builds for a real quick extra burst. And then Flame Wall, burn, and you burn. Cool. Flame Wall. In some builds, some utility, some viability. Gonna have to see the numbers, see if it's worth doing. We then have curse skills in Heist. So they are basically just reworking curse skills almost altogether. So they're reclassifying as like hexes and marks, and marks specifically, what we currently have, aren't going to be the same thing. Instead of just actually cursing everything with your mark, it is like a single target sort of thing. You put it on one enemy, you can have it on one enemy, and it applies to its full bonus. So it is a lot better on bosses now. Then they're showcasing a few new skills. So this one's Impending Doom. And there's a whole new Doom mechanic around these curses as well, which sort of ticks down on enemies, but makes your curses more strong. Makes your curses stronger slowly over time until the max potency at the end. Hex Blast is a new skill which looks really quite sexy. You can see here just the big sort of bolt coming down. It's going to be based off of like the damage that you least negative res the enemies. We'll read it again in a sec. Punishment gets a rework so that it kind of functions similar to a Herald of Ash, where there's like overkill damage spreads to enemies, but it's more of like an explosion sort of thing. So that might actually see quite a bit of use. Doesn't look particularly cool or anything though. So let's have a quick read of this shit. Hexes and marks and hexes. Hex spells are apply curse debuffs to each enemy in an area. If the spell is self-cast, the debuff will gain doom over time up to its maximum. The effect of the curse is increased by the amount of doom it has. That's the kind of new mechanic, doom. The curses that are now considered hexes are flammability, frostbite, conductivity, early weakness, vulnerability, despair, temp chains, enfeeble, and punishment. So they're trying to incentivize self-cast once again to have more potent cursing and sort of incentivize that playstyle. And then marks apply the debuff on a single target and cannot be applied to more than one target. But created new passive skills that apply specifically to marks and marked enemies, aiming to move marks towards being more dexterity aligned as a mechanic, so those passives will be closer to the ranger area. Curses that are considered marks are warlords, poachers, assassin, sniper mark, and which is a reworked proj weakness. So that'll be interesting to see, because proj weakness pretty good right now, you just don't use it too often, I suppose. So they do mention down here that, as I said, marks will be applying to bosses at their full power, so they are kind of being a little bit reworked for that, just so they're probably not going to be too powerful, but they won't be like affected by boss curse reduction. So punishment, Hex Blast, we'll get into Impending Doom and Blast. Impending Doom is a support gem that can support hexes. You attach it to your new curses or hexes. When the supported hex expires or is removed in any way, so even if you recast a different one over the top of it, it triggers Doom Blast, which will cause a chaos explosion. Kind of like your own damage over time Bane, but you'll be activating it sometimes or just letting it expire itself. The more doom the supported hex built up before its expiration, the greater the damage explosion will be. There are a number of ways to cause the explosion to occur. At most basic level, simply kill a monster with supported hex. However, there are many other ways to cause a hex to expire, but that's an exercise we'll leave you to figure out, blah blah blah. Hex Blast. So that's the new skill that has the beam coming down. If the target is cursed with a hex, it consumes that hex and causes a shockwave around that enemy. Similar to Impending Doom, the more doom supported hex has built up, the greater damage skill deals. Although Hex Blast is a chaos damage spell, it has some elemental themed properties that make it special. For one, the damage it deals has the ability to ignite, shock, or freeze. Secondly, it deals damage based on the lowest resistance the enemy has. For example, this lets you use an offensive hex such as Flammability, still make use of the fire resistance reduction that it provides. So if you are going deep into fire or cold or lightning with conductivities, early weaknesses, whatever, you might be able to make this thing do some pretty nutty elemental damage as well. So it looks kind of interesting. Punishment then has been changed, so it no longer causes you to gain bonus, whatever. It doesn't matter what it used to do, it was crap. But instead, curses monsters take increased damage when they're on low life. This synergizes with the second effect that punishment now applies, which causes monsters to explode, dealing a percentage of your overkill damage to monsters around them. In addition, if cursed monsters hit you, they get debilitated. That makes them deal less damage and less movement speed. So you might actually see some use in this one, especially for clear, but I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. Explosion chests and all that, we'll see. But it will actually not be completely ignored at this point. And then the exciting stuff, the last big sort of video for all of these new skills, and that is, what do you call them? Classic spells and steel skills, that's the one. So let's jump into this one. Starting out with a Blazing Salvo. To me, this looks kind of like a magma orb, but a bit more targeted. And I think, as far as I can tell, it looks like it should be really nice for totems. So what it does is the further away you target it, the more spread the area will be. The closer you target it, to yourself, the more localized the area will be. So with totems, if you place them, you know, far away, they're going to have really good clear. Place them next to a boss, they're just going to shit on the boss. And you can get more projectiles with totems pretty comfortably. So I think it looks pretty nice for a totem skill. Otherwise, just a more malleable magma orb as far as I'm concerned. Then the one that everyone's talking about, Crackling Lance. Now this looks kind of like a Divine Ire, but more conal. So Divine Ire to charge up starts by charging up around you. This one, you are attacking just in front of you in sort of a cone, and the more times you attack, as you can see up here, if you're looking up here, the more times you attack, the more localized your beam becomes, and then it becomes basically just a fucking laser that you're shooting out. So if you can justify standing still for long enough or getting those stacks up of Intensify, then you will be just shooting ion cannons. Pinpoint is then pretty interesting as well. It's a new support that supports projectile skills, and you can see that as you consequently cast, you are reducing your projectile count while increasing your damage. So it means that you'll actually be able to use it for things like Frostbolt, possibly Freezing Pulse, stuff like that, to continually cast and localize your damage, and then do more single target. But there's no but. I mean, for Frostbolt, you might still be using Ice Nova because it's pretty hard to outscale that, but for others, it should actually be pretty useful for single target. Firestorm got a pretty big rework, so instead of just lots of shitty little firestorms, you now throw down a huge meteor. There is a limit to the amount of meteors you can throw out recently, I imagine. Something. I'll read it in a sec, but it throws out one big meteor and then a bunch of little fireballs as well on top of it. But looks way chunkier. It looks like it should be way more fun. Glacial Cascade, bit of a rework as well. 100% fizzes cold now, so you don't need a jewel. It's got more burst at the end, as you can kind of see. It travels and then has a big burst at the end, so timing or positioning your Glacial Cascades will be more important than from before. The whole steel skill meta got kind of reworked, and I probably won't go too deep into that one because it looks like something we really have to try out to understand and experience, but there will be basically a new blade mechanic or impale mechanic that you're stacking up, and then unleashing and lancing steel got a bit of a rework as well. As you can see, it looks a bit different. I think it might be better. I think Lancing Steel was in a decent enough position before, it just wasn't a very cool skill, whereas this one looks a bit cooler, I think. Chuck in an Explosion Chest should feel good, and then Splitting Steel is a new skill that you get very early on, I think at level 1 even. Chains around, bounces, explodes, looks pretty damn nifty, might have shit single target, but they're all based around Impale, and we'll have to wait and see and kind of play around with them to see if they feel any good. But there's also a big change for Discharge coming, yet to find out exactly what that is, but they are making pretty big rework on it all around. Won't really talk any more about that till we get the actual proper look at it. Blazing Salvo, as I mentioned, looks more like a totem skill to me. Might even incorporate that as a starter build, Totem Blazing Salvo. Crackling Lance with Intensify, looks insane. Similar to current Arc, kind of a mesh between Arc and Divine Ire. Might be the new hottest build going around, and possibly what everyone wants to do as a starter, myself included. Intensify and Pinpoint, slightly reworked, so Intensify only goes up to 3, so that it's less punishing to have to get up to your stacks. And then Pinpoint, like I said, instead of more proj, it'll go down to less proj and do more damage, so the more times you attack over and over. Firestorm, so Firestorm's been reworked and given more powerful visuals. It's now level 28, calls down a single powerful meteor by a smaller ongoing storm of fire over a duration. Limit on how many ongoing storms can be active at once. So you can call down as many meteors as you'd like, but you can't stack up the ongoing firestorms. So you can't just like shit firestorms all over the screen. And I would imagine this is something like a 3 or 4 cap. Not like, you know, huge amounts, but I'd say there's probably, you know, you can have 3 or 4 firestorms down and shit down meteors as much as you want. So cast on crits, stuff like that, should still love this type of thing. and this has allowed us to greatly increase the area of each impact in the overall damage per cast and improve performance. Ice Storm, bit of a rework with the whole Whispering Ice thing. No real info there though, or on how it looks. Glacial Cascade has a big burst at the end, still viable with plenty of stuff, mines, traps, all that, and 100% fizz to cold just to make it a bit more comfortable. But otherwise, it's also got an inherent knockback now, so that you're really trying to get things to that final burst. But it's still going to be very positional, situational. And then these steel skills, like I said, a lot of stuff going on there. It's kind of confusing, and I think it'll make more sense when I or we play around with it. But reworks to all the steel skills and impale stuff. Typically, impale shit's very strong and probably still will be. Last time around when they released Shattering and Lancing Steel, they were a bit iffy, but once you figured out what to do with Shattering Steel, it was pretty good. Lancing was always kind of meh, but it's okay with certain things at the moment. Still not Omega powerful, but it's probably worth having a shot, especially with a new one that will be very low level. Splitting Steel, I believe. Okay, so that's all I'll say for now. We got patch notes coming in pretty soon, in a few hours' time, and I will do the patch notes reading in like 16 hours' time or something like that from this video. Hopefully that gets uploaded at the right time. Heist looking pretty good. As always, it's mostly all about the new stuff added outside of the league, so the new skills, new reworks, the new fucking gem reworks, whatever. Looks pretty nutty. I want to make a lot of these skills builds already, and I hope you do too. Thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you in the patch notes stream, and I'll see you guys next time.